Super excited to be here moderating this panel today. Just so we have enough time, I want to start by having our panelists introduce themselves. So just in a few sentences, if you can please explain your background, maybe some internships you had, previous positions, and where you are now. Let's just start off with Gino. Gino's currently in the hospitality industry for Hilton. Gino, in a couple sentences, we'd love to hear about your background and where you are today.
Yeah, so working at Hilton worldwide, so multinational company that specializes in hospitality. So we have many brands from Hampton Inn, which is your typical roadside highway hotel, to everything in between with DoubleTree and Hilton Resorts, and then on the high end scale of Waldorf and Conrad's. So very interesting time for travel right now as we are going in the midst of a global pandemic. So definitely interesting, leading the strategy and planning efforts for the Americas right now, but not an unaccomplishable challenge, but definitely a challenge at best. So I am a former agency guy, so I've worked a little bit across multiple areas of the spectrum. I've worked at a digital agency, working on clients like Sky Vodka, Office Depot, Proactive, and then also at like your big four creative agency, working at Publicis Group on the Procter & Gamble businesses. So those are everything's like Crest, Oral-B, Bounty paper towels, Always, Tampax. So I have a little mixture of client and agency side, both creative, media, strategy, and planning. And most of my career has been spent in the performance insights and measurement space. And I more recently have taken on a leadership role in leading the strategy and planning for America's marketing. So.
Awesome, definitely super exciting, and I can't wait to touch more on your role right now. All right, let's pass it to Kathryn. Kathryn's currently at RB, and she works on the brands Move Free and Mega Red for them. So Kathryn, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here today. So again, my name is Kathryn Becht. I'm the brand manager of equity. I'm actually, as of my return from maternity leave back in June, I'm now on the Airborne and Digestive Advantage brands, which has been very interesting over the last few months. As consumers have immunity and the immune health category top of mind, both brands have grown rather dramatically in the last 6 or 7 months now. So it's been a lot of fun. In terms of equity, I'm responsible for audience development, campaign development, and management, really making sure that the brand comes to life across all various consumer touch points, and inclusive of packaging as well. In terms of prior roles, I've done activation, which is more business planning, if you will. It's kind of not the best way to describe it, but business planning. And I've done strategic partnerships and prior roles at other organizations as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. All right, let's go to Lucille. Lucille has had 25 plus years of experience in this industry. She's worked with a lot of national brands, if not global brands. Currently, she's the advisor to bodasci.com. So Lucille, we'd love to hear about your path.
Yeah, sure. Well, you pretty much just covered it there, so I'll turn it over to Jack. No, I'm kidding. You can't see my cane, but I guess I'm the elder one on this panel because it has been over 25 years. Yeah, I'm currently an advisor at Bodasci, which is a technology company.
What, bro? Why would you do that?
Why would I do that? Why would I be an advisor?
It's probably a Zoom bomber. Jeremy, get on that.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
It's not the first time someone's asked me that about my career, so I assumed it was a real question. But Bodasci is short for Body Science Data. It's a technology company that's used and aggregated thousands of women's body types to come up with a new standard for the industry. So it's a relatively old startup, if you will, but it's still gearing up, and it's really poised to expand into the major market given the consumption of internet sales, particularly in the apparel industry. I am a lifelong marketer, so I always feel like it's a self-help class when I say that. My background predominantly being in retail, so this is where most people are like, oh, I'm sorry. And I've worked for major brands, as Asha has said. I spent 7 years at Ralph Lauren, I was global CMO at Tumi. I did 2 bouts at Maiden Forum, which is women's intimate apparel and leisure and activewear in a senior executive role. Most recently, I was at Bed Bath & Beyond. I was the director of CRM, marketing strategy, and business development for specific customer segments. So that was pretty much managing a 360 business model for individual consumers that fell either within a mover segment or the college segment. I am an FDU alum, hence, I guess, my appearance on the panel, and really looking forward to the conversation as we move forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Sarah. Sarah has extensive knowledge in the hospitality industry, and she's currently at Wyndham Destinations.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having me. Yeah, so I'm at Wyndham Destinations based in Orlando, Florida. Moved here about 1.5 years ago. I do product and program development, so I don't have a typical marketing title like I have up until now, but you know, we have a division in New Jersey that many of you may be familiar with, Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. We're actually a separate publicly traded company. And I worked there for 10 years and they do all the hotel side of the business. But at Wyndham Destinations here in Orlando, we do vacation clubs, exchange and rentals. And, you know, so some of the brands that we have are under the vacation club side is Club Wyndham, Margaritaville Vacation Club by Wyndham, in partnership with Margaritaville. We have Worldmark by Wyndham, Shell Vacations Club. So we really talk about owning vacations. And, you know, I know Gino talked about Hilton. Hilton has a separate company as well that does Hilton Vacations, and they've got a vacation club as well. So that's the business I'm working on right now, developing not just improving our current products that we have and what the value proposition is for an owner, but also developing new ways of how to buy that for, you know, new generations to come. And also on the program side, develop programs that that increase the value proposition for our owner. So doing that right now came from doing more pure marketing before. So spent 10 years at Wyndham Hotel Group in New Jersey, working on different brands, as well as their loyalty program, Wyndham Rewards. And then I actually left in between Wyndham for a couple years to lead marketing for Trump Hotels. And so that's all been hospitality. Before that, I spent the beginning of my career with Kraft Foods doing consumer promotions on some of the Nabisco brands, as well as interned at Radio City Entertainment doing marketing for the Christmas Spectacular. So that's my background, and I'll pass it over.
Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, last but not least, we're going to introduce Rick, who some of you guys might know because he's an adjunct professor at FDU. So if you didn't have him before, you might have him in the future. He's currently a sports journalist and media manager at Scout Media Network. So Rick, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, some of you may have had me as a professor or perhaps have some upcoming courses in the spring. I'm also an FDU alum. I graduated with an undergraduate in business management. From that point, I actually rolled into an MBA at Fairleigh Dickinson, studying entrepreneurship and marketing. From there, I worked with a lot of small businesses doing marketing consulting, really trying to, at that point was when the recession hit, was trying to find full-time work, working as a marketing consultant. And I actually took an opportunity in the telecom sector, working for Verizon Wireless in the corporate sector. I found out pretty quickly that just wasn't the environment for me, wasn't the industry, and looked at potentially going back to school and exploring and really developing my know-how in the sports industry because I had a passion for sports. I'll go into it a little more deeply, but the overlying theme is that I ended up starting as an intern for Fox Sports during my time doing an MSA at Fairleigh Dickinson. And I caught on writing for the New York Jets. At that time, the facility was being built right across the way in Florham Park. And for me, it was a career-altering experience because I realized I always wanted to be in and around sports, particularly professional sports. So I've had author bylines at 247 Sports, CBS, Fox Sports, Scout Media, Sports Illustrated, and probably a couple I'm leaving out. What I'm currently, so those have been some of my past roles. I've done everything from content curation to managing social media accounts with millions of followers and putting out content in that regard. But I've currently kind of made a pivot in my career where instead of traveling to and from practices and all these events and games, and frankly, with the timing of this pandemic, couldn't have been better. I've kind of segued more into authoring books based on my experience and some of the industry contracts I've built. So currently I'm actually working on a book via History Press. It's on the history of the Brooklyn Nets. So that's set to be published in October of 2021. So basically a year from today. As I was telling Mary at the start of the speaking engagement, I've been rather busy. I know a lot of people are anxious to get back to work, but I have really relished this time to have a little quiet time, downtime, and to work remotely to focus on my book and some of the other writing obligations and jobs that I have.
Thank you so much. And we'll definitely all be at your book signing when it comes out. So thank you guys all for sharing. I think it's super unique that you guys all had such unique career paths. It really shows that there's no one single way to go in this industry. So that's really comforting. My next question for everyone is, with your first job, did you learn a lot of the things on the job, or did your marketing classes actually help you prepare for that job? Let's just circle back. So let's start with Gino, if you want to give us an answer, and then you guys can just all jump in from there.
Yeah, I think the education is an important piece that helps set the groundwork and the frameworks of just around all the different functions within marketing or brand management. And I think it was amazingly, just an amazing group of content that just helps you steer and understand. I think when you get your first job out of college, everything is so new to you. Like there's different roles and responsibilities across an organization that could be very confusing and almost overwhelming. And so I think by setting up the coursework does give you those foundations and those principles that you then take with you as a guiding light. Because a lot of what you do will be learned on the job. Marketing strategy is different from every company you go to. And having those principles in place allows you to at least steer and understand within an organization, what is their approach to these different things. And without that kind of foundational knowledge, I think you really would be lost. And so I think it's a little bit of a balance where it's a good foundation, but be open and be looking to be a sponge with every organization you go into to just suck up all the knowledge that is there at your disposal.
I would just echo what Gino said. I mean, it gives you great foundational knowledge. I found, because I did have experience first when I graduated working for smaller local type businesses, that there was an adjustment for me scaling that to the corporate level, working with billion-dollar brands and doing B2B sales and marketing consulting. So I will say that there is nothing like being on the job and learning from the actual the job, so to speak. But for me, again, one of the most important lessons I learned was marketing and branding yourself. And at that time, of course, resume writing was so important. It was a down economy, so employers are very selective in who they were hiring, and very few even were. So you really had to separate yourself from the pack. So there are a lot of creative ways, and I'll kind of get into that in a little bit, of branding yourself. And one of the ways that personally I tried to do that was to be multifaceted. I know, and this probably is a lot of people's experience throughout their careers, is that you're not just asked to be a one-trick pony, so to speak. You may rotate among different roles in your job. Even my first, call it corporate job at Verizon Wireless, I worked everywhere from in the marketing communications office at the corporate center to the retail location. I learned operations. So the more aspects of a business I was exposed to, I tended to kind of harken back to my college days and learn and go back to those courses, and even the psychology of things, industrial organizations, old psychology, to try to motivate employees or coworkers, etc. So I did get a great deal of knowledge. I will say that going and getting my MBA was one of the best decisions I made, because again, it was no guarantee of success in any field, but it gives you a fighting chance and puts your foot in the door, so to speak. and you find yourself surrounded with a lot of people that are also aspirational or either working towards a degree or a career. And it was certainly something that if I were to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't change. I would roll right into an MBA.
Yeah, I'll add to that since it's ad hoc, so I hope I'm not going too much out of order. All of my marketing was learned on the job. I was an English communications major, minored in psychology with a concentration in advertising. So I had fundamentally zero business experience. And that was because I was leaning a little bit more to the creative side. I thought I was going to pursue a career in communications and journalism, sort of pivoted and took a liking in my earlier career to an ad agency, and then sort of moved right into what became my retail path with a shopping center developer, an Australian company called Westfield International. I have to say, when I first went to school, and again, this is a die job, so it was many decades ago. And I would tell you that the industry and marketing has changed so fundamentally, and I don't see that changing. I don't really see any career path not being exceptionally progressive. So my one key advice would be definitely need an MBA. I eked out not having an MBA, and the only thing that continues to catapult me is the fact that I have so many different key brands and experiences behind me that no longer becomes a requirement, but it is so prevalent now that it's a point of entry. So I highly would recommend that you do that. Another key tip I would say is, even if you're leaning more to the creative, to the content, to more high-level strategy, always take business courses. I did not, and I had to learn on the job. And I have to say, as I became much more senior, it became much more critical for me to paddle really quickly under the water. So taking finance, basic accounting, economics, even though it may have nothing to do with where you think you're going to be, knowing how an organization makes money and how that gets reflected into the business is critical for you to have a more senior level seat at the table. And then I would lastly say, always have continued learning. That is one of the things that's kept me very relevant, has been always engaging in industry related events, seminars, webinars, workshops. I've gone back for 2 different certifications at MIT and Rutgers just to stay relevant within the digital and social media spaces. If nothing else, it looks good on your resume, but it also fines tunes you so that even if your education is dated, and your work experience is progressing, that you're always somewhat at the cutting edge of where things are leading. Again, regardless of what aspect of marketing you're going into.
I guess to add to that, I guess the biggest thing that I would say was a benefit in being a marketing major and going into the field, what I did learn in the classroom that I think was a great foundation was really the strategy and planning. So learning how to write a marketing plan, a strategic plan, knowing how to structure those and what the components are, I definitely think gave me an advantage compared to some of the other people who may have not been a marketing major, but ended up going into marketing. They didn't have that foundation, how to learn that on the job. I think so much else though is really learned on the job. Like, you know, Lucille mentioned, like marketing evolves over the years. So the forms of media that you use and all the tools that you use to do it, to execute upon your plan is something you're really you're mainly going to learn on the job.
I would just add, I think we have a pretty unique panel today with many people coming from different points and at different times in terms of the evolution of the marketing profession. So I think you're getting a lot of really good advice today, right now. What I would add though is your entire experience at college can really help you in your first job. And that starts from, getting an internship and leveraging your networks within your college, within, the college environment to be able to land that really good internship. But not just your marketing classes. Pay attention, as Lucille said, to finance classes. Pay attention to your communications classes, your writing classes. Being able to write an effective email will set you apart instantly from the rest of, the first timers in a business. Being able to properly articulate your idea quickly and effectively, both verbally and in a PowerPoint, will set you apart from the rest of, the first timers. So really take advantage of all of your classes and don't, go beyond what's in front of you in terms of, curriculum and class agenda, and talk to your professors and really get into the weeds of what you're trying to learn, because anything you get out of your class beyond just, what's being presented to you in an agenda, class agenda, will really help you tremendously as you start to navigate what your next step is. And it may not be straight into an MBA. I was not straight into an MBA. In fact, I don't have my MBA. But I've been able to evolve, and I did actually, like Rick, start off in small business. And that's actually an advantage that I have, because big business is looking for somebody who has more of a small business nimble mindset. So that is something that they hired me for. So you can go many different ways, but I think that for me, the number one thing for advice to you would be to take advantage of every aspect of your education.
Thank you all so much for that. It really spoke to the value of education, especially now in this time. So thank you. My next question is for Gino. Why did you choose marketing analytics and strategy as a career, and would you recommend it to a new graduate?
I wish I had the foresight to say that it was something that was going to set up a great career for me, but it was really opportunistic in nature. So I definitely have education ADD. I think I started FDU as a computer science major. I then switched to marketing. My senior year, I wanted to switch to finance, but I decided to opt for the MBA instead. So I really wanted to I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then an opportunity presented itself at a digital agency, which was very startup in nature, 8-people company when I joined. And this was at a time in the world where Facebook wasn't even a public company. So we were doing all things from creative and media on the platform, but there was a lacking of, I was an account manager by title. There was a lacking for a more consistent financial reporting derived from the e-commerce driven from the Facebook social campaigns. So I really just took that opportunity to kind of help build out that functionality within a small company that blended together the 3 things that I loved so much: the computer science, the digital programming aspect of it, the marketing and communications, and then ultimately the finances and the revenue that are derived from those campaigns. And then from there, it was just kind of a snowball effect of just finding opportunities within companies that, there was a lack of a discipline or a lack of a structure within these kind of fields. And in a space that is continuously evolving, it leaned into my education ADD, where I constantly have to learn new ways of data sets, new channels that are popping up every single day. And so for me, it keeps me entertained and excited and motivated for the job. So if I had to say to recommend to anybody, I think everybody should be data literate and digitally literate to just understand how all of these things are collecting and sharing our personal information. And, it makes you a more informed user of these platforms, but also there's just a definite need within organizations to have the data backbone and the analytical backbone in everything that you do. As you're creating different, whether it be communication plans or marketing plans or business development plans, everything needs that kind of rigor based off of previous performance insights, white space opportunity that's sized up. And ultimately, if you want to own a P&L for a brand or a business unit, those types of functions are transferable. So I would definitely recommend it to anybody who is interested or who has more of a maybe mathematical bend to their brain.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And it really speaks to the fact that a lot of the jobs that people have now probably weren't even as popular when they graduated college. So thank you for sharing. All right. My next question's for Kathryn. Why did you go into brand management, and what about it challenges you?
So firstly, I do want to just bounce off of what Gino just said. Data drives everything in marketing today. So even, your creative choices, your messaging choices, your media plans, it is all incredibly data driven. So having that background is definitely important in terms of what you're trying to, if you're seeking a marketing role. So I love brand management because I like having my hands in everything. So a traditional brand manager role runs the business, runs the brand. They are responsible, this person's responsible for the profit and loss statement. They're responsible for innovation, equity, the media plan, whether that's traditional media or non-traditional or a mix of both. They really do have their hands in everything as the ultimate person that is responsible for how the business performs. Whether it's growing the business or trying to turn something around or even launching a new brand. So that's what I love about it, because I like being in the driver's seat when it comes to a brand. It's different than perhaps a channel marketer or someone that's a little bit more focused on a particular discipline. So you really do get a more holistic view, which has its, it has its pros and cons. And I sort of made my way up through various types of marketing. So I've been a channel marketer, I've done shopper marketing, I've done partnerships marketing. And so I've sort of made my way through and up, and so that I could be over an entire brand. So one of the things that challenges me is that everything changes a lot. Marketing has evolved incredibly over the last few years, and I love it. It's great. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps things very interesting. And again, to echo Gino, like there is so much to learn all the time, and I love learning. So it's a fun ride. And right now, with the brands that I'm currently working on, we're in a very unique situation. The marketplace has changed dramatically, and there is no real telling what consumer behavior will be in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And it's an unknown space, but it is so much fun.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear alum that are so passionate about their jobs. So thank you for sharing. All right, let's go to Sarah. Sarah, why did you choose the hospitality industry, and what are the opportunities within this industry that excite you?
Thank you. So I had no idea that I would go into hospitality, even though I've been in it for like 14 years now. When I was a marketing student, I took product management. I really wanted to be in CPG and be in brand management like Kathryn. And I did start out working for Kraft Foods, but then I ended up in hospitality. And really, when my first 9 years at the hotel side of Wyndham, I spent basically doing brand management, but for a hotel brand, and, developing the messaging, the value proposition, doing, campaigns and media and kind of the whole spectrum of all of those things that Kathryn talked about. So, I think a lot of times when you're going to school, you just don't, you think about a product, but you may not think about an experience. And so, I think, how can you not love being able to message travel and experiences, and who doesn't love to go experience the world? So it's fascinating, it's fun. You're helping people create lifelong memories. So being a part of that is an honor. And the other thing about just going back to lifelong memories and just like the experience side, one of the brands that we have in at Wyndham Destinations today the tagline is "Live your bucket list." And then in my last company at Trump, our hotel tagline was "Never settle." I mean, how can you not? It's just, you're really pulling at people's aspirations. And so, and then the other thing is being in hospitality, you think, okay, I've worked for a hotel company or vacation clubs, but really we touch so many other things depending on what else that brand has to offer, whether it's, developing spa and restaurant concepts and launching those, retail, and so much more. So I think it's really an exciting path that I hadn't thought of when I was going to school.
Definitely. And thank you for sharing. I'm sure a lot of people here are a little bit convinced and are like, ooh, let me consider hospitality now. All right, let's pass it over to Rick. Rick, you have an MBA and a master's in sports administration. My question to you is, would you do it again if you were starting over?
So I may have accidentally already answered this question, but I did leave out that I do feel when I took my MBA that there were so many opportunities, and I can just give you a few examples. I took a capstone course where we did consulting for a pharmaceutical packaging company. So an industry I never, frankly, had a desire to be in. I knew nothing about, but I learned so much just about on a top level of pharmaceuticals, what goes into bringing a product to the public, the FDA approval process, how important packaging is from a financial standpoint to safety regulations to complying with FDA standards. That kind of experience, and again, the undergraduate foundational knowledge I learned in consumer behavior, I could go, name a whole litany of courses, but to have that hands-on experience actually going to a company, which amounted to almost like an internship, was invaluable to me. And even to this day, I still use a lot of my MBA coursework because I still on a part-time basis do some marketing consulting in the media world. I fall back on it. I actually have a log of a lot of my MBA coursework that I did, whether it was writing business plans, as we had a startup capital course where we basically were pitching ideas to capital investors and angel investors. So it's such a, I would call it a deeper level of learning, and it really harnesses and crystallized everything, assuming that you rolled into the similar area of study, it crystallizes everything you learned at the undergraduate level and really brings it to life, having worked with people that are in the field, working in the field through internships, and then of course through your own career work as well. So again, not to sound redundant, I would absolutely do it again. Even though I found myself in the sports industry, when I'm interviewing, even for my book, I interview business executives, front office executives, having that understanding and just a general business knowledge, you're a lot more qualified and credible to be able to have an intelligent conversation with those types of people that are working at billion-dollar companies and billion-dollar teams that are basically reporting to the owner of those franchises. So again, I have no regrets. I was very fortunate in that regard that I did roll right into the MBA, and I would do it again.
Thank you. And I'm sure your experience makes a lot of people start considering FDU's 4+1 program that we have here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's hear from Lucille. Lucille, you're an expert in global marketing and branding. How did you get to where you are today? And can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory?
Sure. Well, first thing, I feel like as you progress in your career, you become more humble. So I'm not really sure I consider myself an expert in anything because I'm a student of everything. I did not have a master roadmap. I know I sound like this haphazard success story, but I kind of followed both interest and opportunity. I knew that I liked sort of creative business. As I mentioned, I started in an ad agency. That agency had retail accounts. None of you will have heard of them. Bamberger's, Hanes, some of the original department stores. And I was fortunate enough to have worked on some of those. And I was intrigued by that business. I really liked the immediacy of having the customer facing exposure. And there was no industry like retail where you knew what was selling the second it was selling. You knew, the next day how you performed the day prior. You knew if you changed a promotion, what that response was. So it didn't have the lag time. It was something very fast paced and impulse driven around retail. I had the opportunity then from the agency to move into shopping centers. Having grown up on Long Island, when I heard that there was a career path where I can actually work in a mall and not be behind a register, I jumped at the chance. I didn't know what a shopping center developer was. I didn't really know what the responsibilities would be for the marketing director of those centers. But it was an emerging company called Westfield International. It was an Australian-based company, so I would say some of my global roots started there, where I worked very closely with the global owners. They had only 7 properties in the US and quickly over the years catapulted to, I think they're still number 3 in the world. And they have development pretty much in every country, including the base of the World Trade Center, Dubai. They have properties everywhere. So I scaled with that organization and I reached a peak where I probably had the most fun in my entire career having worked for a shopping center. I mean, these were the days of you know, the Saturday morning TV fairs and the soap opera stars visiting shopping centers and having concerts with Tiffany or Debbie Gibson. And I'm really dating myself now. So go ahead, everyone, Google search those people because you probably never heard of them. But every day was new. There was holiday decor. There were Easter bunnies. There,
Lucille.
yeah. Oh, you know, I've heard of them. So at
Yes,
least
I have.
Okay, great. So I had the most fun in that career, and I realized, you know what, I could stay down this path forever. But there was I felt like I was reaching the roof in shopping centers because I was only able to drive leasing strategies, bring traffic, manage the communications and the community. But it was limited in the fact that I wasn't really touching the business or the customer directly. So I had the opportunity then to move into the retail side at Liz Claiborne, which was my first real corporate marketing job. And I was in the accessories division. And then from there, I had moved into more of a retail position, a corporate branding role at Maidenform. So I had joined Maidenform twice. This was earlier in my career. And I was in charge of product launches, wholesale marketing, displays, collateral, everything soup to nuts to bringing our Maidenform brand and products to retailers such as Macy's, Kohl's, Walmart, Costco, etc. I then was recruited to join Ralph Lauren, which was an amazing opportunity. I spent close to 8 years there in the vertical and specialty retail side. And the reason that I went from the corporate brand role to the retail is because I really like the linear path and the vertical path of delivering not just the goods and the products, but delivering them directly through a singular channel versus wholesale, which is multiple channels, but also you're distanced from making impact of the customer and control of the brand. So Ralph Lauren, I didn't have any global exposure. I was very much specific to the launch of Rugby, which doesn't exist anymore as a separate brand and retail structure, but was really great because I did, head of the childs, grassroots marketing. We did in-store concerts. We had a lot of exposure through the launch of that brand and developing database and doing a lot of the traditional retail marketing functions that you'd see mostly today as social media really just started to evolve and internet just started to evolve with websites. The limitations and the question I still get to this day is why would you leave a company like Ralph Lauren? Good news is I sold the stock at a high. And the second good news is that I was able to move on to a really great opportunity at Tumi, which was an international travel accessories brand and was moving more into lifestyle. So David Chu, who was the founder of Nautica and one of the key designers, was brought on to Tumi to really transform that from a suitcase company to a travel lifestyle company. And I was part of that transition and was able to oversee all aspects of marketing, not just the retail function. In this case, I had tremendous exposure to all the different global marketplaces from a PR and business standpoint. And I did get to pretty much travel the world. And that was exceptionally exciting for me to learn the different cultures, learn the nuances of what works in one place does not work in another place. There are different tones of voice. There are different protocols, right down to different models that you use and how much clothing they should or shouldn't have on in the ad campaigns. So again, a lot of learning on the job simply by being exposed to the countries and the actual countries. And then I had moved back to Maidenform at a CMO level. And this too was in a global capacity where I did a lot of global travel and did a lot of oversight of actually all of the marketing functions, not just PR, from branding to product launches to point of sale, both for retail as well as wholesale. So we were able to do the first ever Maidenform fashion show in Amsterdam. We were able to do a partnership with Mad Men costume designer Jamie Bryant and really start to make that brand a lot more relevant to a younger audience because it was close to a 75-year-old heritage brand that needed just to be resurfaced in light of the tremendous success that Victoria's Secret was happening. I then moved from Maidenform to Tristar Products. Tristar Products is a direct-to-consumer company, otherwise known as the As Seen on TV. I will say that has to be one of the most questionable business practices and industries I've ever had the pleasure to work within, but we had an amazingly fun time working with the Jack LaLanne family and relaunching, working with Sarah Ferguson, Duchess Discoveries, and really developed and honed in on creating brand stories and launching individual companies within the umbrella of the Tristar Products portfolio. And then I moved to Bed Bath & Beyond, which was my most recent experience. And I did oversee, as part of that role, not just mover audience and college audience segments, but also overseeing all of the Bed Bath & Beyond Canadian marketing. So there again, if you're going to get into any kind of global role, you must immerse yourself. Do not think you know because you're at corporate. Do not think that you understand the business. One of the critical learnings that I had was just listening to the international business partners, because their needs are very different. And the more that they know that you're partnering with them and that you really understand the uniqueness of their region and what they're looking for versus what corporate or the brand is telling them to do, the more you'll build an affinity and a partnership, and the much more successful you'll be in the international space. So that was, I had a really great time in working with that team from Toronto to Vancouver, and really understanding the nuances of the Canadian market. I thought it would be easy because I figured Canada is kind of like the US, just different. It's really different. So it's not so much like the US, but they do still speak English and they're really nice. So I will give them that. So that was kind of my path. Like I said, it was opportunistic and interest. The one hindsight I have is I wish I was a little bit more intentional. I really did find a great career path, but I wish I would have at least mentally outlined that so I was driving it more strategically. It worked out very well for me, but again, a lot of it was just circumstance and opportunity.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing with all of us, Lucille. My next question is, what are some skills that are important to have in order to succeed in your own careers, or just to succeed in general? Kathryn, if you would like to start us off, and we can go from there.
Sure. So I think communication is probably one of the most important skills that you can have. And what I mean by that is, verbal communication as well as written. And, written today, there's plenty of Zoom phone calls or Teams phone calls, but reality is you're doing a lot more over email than you might normally. So to be able to effectively communicate what it is that you're trying to do or what you're trying to gain alignment on will essentially help you achieve your goals, the business goals, and set you apart from others, and ensure, as you're working and progressing your career, that you are seen as, a good communicator. So really hone those email skills, and really, as well as your presentation skills too. And then, strategic thinking, that is absolutely, incredibly important to your success as well. And, certainly those are things that you can learn in school, and you can certainly learn on the job as well. So it's a combination of both. So strategic thinking, ultimately, you can have great communication skills, or you can be a strong strategic thinker, but if you can't communicate that effectively, you're going to find yourself, unable to move forward because you're not, you struggle perhaps to push your projects forward. So those are the two things that I would say are really important skills to hone.
Yeah, I guess I would say really a balance, like in a marketing career, a balance of the ability to be creative, to evaluate creative things, but also to be strategic, analytical, to understand finance. Because again, when you work on a brand, you're a business person trying to push business strategies forward through marketing. Unless you're working at an advertising agency, and you're working directly on the creative side, but even then you want to understand the client's business needs. So I would just say really a balance of those things. I think a lot of people think of marketing as I can just be a creative person and I don't need to know the analytical or finance side, but I would say you gotta kind of have that balance between the two.
And for those of you that can hear, my dog agrees with us. These are the challenges of working via Zoom. But my biggest thing would be, quite frankly, is to always stay open to learning. I remember being in 4th grade and seeing a poster on the wall that said, "The more you learn, the less you know." And I never truly knew what that meant until I found myself in my first job and kind of on the track of my career, that, boy, did I study this in depth, undergraduate and graduate level. And as many of the panelists alluded to, there's nothing like being there, learning from people with experience, learning on the job, so to speak. So it's really a humbling experience. And as part of that, I would say also kind of checking your ego at the door, that no matter what your credentials are, your experience through internships, the degrees that you've earned, whether you were at the top of the class, somewhere in the middle, or at the bottom, there's always more learning to do and people to learn from. So I would say checking your ego would be important. And I always stress being multifaceted. For me, I found myself in a number of different roles. I was rotated. I was doing a lot of editorial, so that was online writing. I also, as I mentioned, was curating a lot of content and sending it out on the social media channels to millions of sports fans. So I learned a lot about email marketing in that regard that I've kind of brought to my content marketing courses that I teach students, as well as doing broadcast journalism, whether that's radio appearances on Sirius XM or a few TV spots here and there. It's again, for me, you're learning on the job, and I never was a journalism major. So I guess if there's a regret I have, maybe it would be taking more of those broadcasting courses or perhaps a public speaking course, because I'm finding out during this pandemic that I'm really what I would call an introverted extrovert. So I'm pretty happy working remotely. I love people, but I do find that from time to time, I do need to work on my public speaking, even to this day, even though I work in the broadcast field, so to speak. So there's always room for growth and development, and never stop learning would be my advice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Okay. Me? Okay. I'll add to that. So I would say I have a couple of quick stories and then just some advice. I will definitely reinforce the need for presentation. You must be comfortable speaking in front of people. I cannot tell you how many opportunities I had simply because I was the only one that was willing to step up and present the team's work. So you have to be really good at communicating and creating a story and not just talking through and reading slides. You have to really learn how to engage with an audience. And later on through your career, you'll learn how to influence the audience. But if you could just get comfortable in front of people, and no one is comfortable in front of people. I mean, Barbara Streisand has stage fright. People often ask me, don't you ever get nervous? I'm like, all the time. But you just have to do it, so you almost develop mental calluses to that. Part of, and one of the things that I had done early in my career, and really it was just out of interest because I was a little bit more of a creative, I had taken some improv classes. And it was not only a great deal of fun, but it taught me how to deal with all of the unexpected things that happen in meetings, in jobs, and particularly in presentations. When, the presentation goes out, how do you fill that void? When, information is wrong, how do you rebound from that? If you're losing an audience, how do you somehow re-engage with them? So if you ever have the opportunity, even if it's just team building or fun or something that you could do in the summer break, take an improv class. It will teach you how to feed off of other people. It will teach you how to be in the moment, and it will teach you how to bring a new dimension to an audience that maybe you weren't necessarily memorized to present that day. So it keeps you on your toes. The other story that I'll tell really quickly is, how I ultimately got one of my first key promotions. And this goes back to either being curious and being prepared. So I would always show up at the ad agency in a suit. I was a geek that way. I was the person that always sat in the front of the class, so the teacher knew I was exceptionally curious about what he was saying and engaged, and that went a long way. And I always took that skill with me to each of my careers. So every day I would sit in the pool of all the other coordinators and admin and junior level people. They were all just very casually and, appropriate to the level of their job spec. But I was always coming in dressing for, quote unquote, the job that you wanted to have. This may be very much 80s and 90s logic. But again, it could just be mental preparedness or networking in advance so that you are that person that other people can come to when there is an opportunity. So sure enough, the opportunity presented itself. The account team was presenting to a major retail account, and they were down a person. So this is in the day where you would go in with a team of people in the ad agency, and you have the creative and the account person and the media person. And it was important that you had this presence of, look how important you are that we're sending all of these people to you to present. And they were down a person. So they literally poked their head into the bullpen and they said, we need a body. We need a body. Who can we take? And they saw me all suited up and they said, you come with us. You're going to go on the pitch. We landed the account. I wound up being on the account team, and then I wound up getting promoted as an account director, and then oversaw a lot of the retail. So when I say those two things around be curious, be resilient, and then also be prepared, I think those are skills that innately everyone has, but you have to be mindful so that you're prepared to utilize them. So they're not necessarily technical skills, they're more personality skills, but that will go a very long way in differentiating you.
Gino, did you have something to add to that?
One of the many things that I've learned in my career is when you don't have any value to add, because it's all been said already, speaking just is a waste of air. So let's keep going.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. All right. My next question is that, I'm currently 21, and a lot of people my age are either juniors or seniors in college getting ready to enter the workforce. What's some advice that you guys would give your 21-year-old self if you had the chance to start all over again? Let's kick it off with Sarah, if you would kindly start, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, just a couple quick thoughts. One is I would tell myself to take more risks. I wanted to have this very straight path to what my ultimate goal was. And it was the times down the road that I took risks or took a role that maybe didn't follow that path that I learned the most by far. So I would say take risks. I'd probably tell my 21-year-old self I was so worried about getting a job and, doing all these things that I'd maybe tell myself to take a little more time and see more of the world. I have since done a lot more of that. But, back when I had more time to do that. And then also to consider your passions when you're thinking about your career. I guess maybe I wouldn't have known this then because I wasn't 21 yet, but one of my passions is traveling around the world and learning about wine. And I'm like, I wish I knew that because maybe I would have gone to school for wine or something like that. So I guess just thinking about what are the things you love and how do you build your career around that? I do love my career, I have to say, because I love traveling. So I'm lucky. I found a great career and I love marketing. But, just consider that and don't think about the money because the money will come.
I would say find a mentor. Throughout your career, you're going to have a lot of reporting managers and people who do have your best interest internally. But something that's really nice to have is just a mentor that could be a sounding board, someone who's outside of your organization or even outside of your industry. So just kind of bounce ideas off of, give you perspective, and keep you kind of grounded in what's the big picture kind of things, especially when you're young and you're working crazy hours. Sometimes you're not prioritizing yourself or your passion projects, and a mentor could really help be that kind of coach for you. And, especially with the powers of LinkedIn that there is today, there's a ton of avenues to create those relationships and start it out. And I think that's really important. It's been something that I wish I would have done sooner is getting an external mentor to help steer me.
I'll jump in. I actually have a bracelet that says this. It says be intentional. And I might have mentioned this in one of my earlier comments. I've gone through and had the pleasure of having a lot of career and executive coaches. And one of my coaches had told me this. She said, you need to be more intentional. And it really didn't sink in. That's why I bought the bracelet, so that I could remind myself what it meant. But slowly, as I became much more aware and understood where my strengths and weaknesses were, I really, again, it was, interest and opportunity. But in being intentional means a lot of different things. What do you want to get out of this webinar? For the students, are you just sort of chilling out saying, I'm just going to listen to it? That's very passive. If you're going to be intentional, you want to go in saying, here's what I want to get out of it. I either want to connect with this person because I looked at their background. I want to find a potential mentor. I want to ask this question because it's been weighing on me. And it doesn't have to be a lofty intention, but you need to enter every business opportunity with what you want to get out of it. Right down to, and I remember this was another colleague told me something very similar. I had an opportunity to have, I always had meetings with David Lauren because I worked directly for him. But one of the group presidents on the business side, I had an opportunity to have a meeting with them. It was very high profile. And I was going to wing it. I mean, I was just like, I know what I figured they were going to ask me questions and I knew my information. And A colleague said, well, how are you going to manage the meeting? I was like, manage the meeting? I was like, it's her meeting. I'm just going to, and he said, well, you have this amazing opportunity, have this face-to-face with a group president over all of global retail. What is it you want out of that meeting? What is it that you want to influence or make an impression about? And that's when the aha moment came for me, where I was literally entering an amazing moment of opportunity without an intention for myself. Did I want her to, be more memorable toward me? Did I want to promote some of my skill sets? Did I need her help or assistance in career pathing? Did I need her help in solving problems? Or did I just really want to pick her brain and get a vision or understanding what's important to her so I can be successful? Again, it could be a very silent intention, but don't miss those opportunities. And a more relevant example for you guys would be, I eavesdropped onto one of the marketing business webinars probably about a month or so ago. And not one of those people found me on LinkedIn. Not one connected with me. And I said, what a missed opportunity. And I will tell you, it's a real opportunity, because while I was at Ralph Lauren, I used to give a lot of marketing seminars to college students. And I did one for FDU. We had a class come in, and only one student brought their resume with them. I wound up hiring that person a couple of years later at Maidenform. And it wasn't because there weren't other qualified people in the room. I didn't know them, and they weren't proactive, and they weren't intentional in finding that opportunity and taking advantage of it. So I would say 21-year-old self, get your shit together.
I would agree with that. I spoke at a FDU hospitality sales and marketing class like 2 or 3 years ago. And when I was working in New York, and there was one person who just, you could tell her energy. And then she contacted me after, got her an internship at my company, like a month later. So it was just, just don't be shy, reach out.
And that person, Sarah, is on the Zoom today.
It was actually a different person, but that was it. It was someone working at one of the hotels.
Okay. But another person is on the Zoom that you also helped.
Sarah.
Thanks again, Sarah Koves.
And just to piggyback off what Lucille and Sarah and also Gino had mentioned, I mean, I think that's all terrific advice. And I could just speak to my experience now being a professor, now via Zoom, but of course in the spring, possibly in person, is that I would tell my 21-year-old self to speak up, that I was as engaged. I would sit at the front of the class. I would, try to make notes when there would be guest speakers coming in, but I wouldn't necessarily, for probably a few different reasons, maybe because other people weren't asking questions, or maybe just had a bad day, didn't want to speak up, but I would try to urge myself to step out of that box, step out of my comfort zone, and show and vocalize, because I always knew that I was engaged and listening and taking notes in other ways to try to retain the information. But maybe just a little bit too shy at that age, hadn't come out of my box, but I think that's probably pretty typical. But the more you can do in that regard, like for instance, I had several opportunities to do interviews, perhaps in jobs that I had no intention of pursuing, that maybe in the financial sector or otherwise. And I turned down those opportunities to go for face-to-face interviews when, as we mentioned before, none of this, my broadcasting, any of the work I do never happened overnight. I didn't have a natural born talent with it. It just was from repetition and experience. And if I would have maybe had a few more of those interviews under my belt, and good, bad, and indifferent experiences, then maybe I would be able to be further along my career at this point. So I would just tell my 21-year-old version of myself everything that Gino said, Lucille and Sarah, but to be more of a risk taker and not be so risk adverse and worried about the negative outcome, as opposed to, even if it's not a positive experience, at least it's going to be a learning experience that's going to help you down the road.
I'm just going to echo literally what everyone said, because I think it's all really good advice. The only thing that I might add is it's hard to do this when you're 21 and you're just starting out. But this was actually advice that I received from a friend of mine not that long ago, which was build a hype folder. So all of your accomplishments in a single folder. So when you've had that bad day, you go open that folder and you're like, yeah, I kind of did a good job here, and I did a good job here, and these are things that I I shine at. And so maybe today was just a bad day. That was really good advice that I got from a friend of mine not that long ago. So that would be something that I would start, not at this point in my career, but probably a lot earlier.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Somebody who's 21 myself, I'm definitely taking that to heart. So thank you. Now I know Lucille and Sarah touched a little bit about this before, but my next question is, what do you guys look for in a candidate when you're recruiting someone for a position with your own company? Lucille, I know you touched upon it, but would you like to just, add a little bit more to that question?
Curiosity. For me is important. Asking a lot of questions, listening. I think that's a critical skill set. Having done your homework, people that just go to the website right before an interview shows. People that, for me, actually go to a store, talk to an associate, ask customer questions. I mean, I would go so prepared to even corporate level positions, knowing different stores, knowing the point of sale, knowing the merchandise mix. So being prepared, being proactive, and being curious, I think are critical skill sets for me when I'm looking for that. And to try to find the opportunity on how you can add value versus what is this position going to do for me? Now, granted, we all have to manage our own career path, but don't go into that saying, what could you do for me? It has to be more about how can I add value? How can I be a contributing part of this team? So I guess it does kind of relate back to the whole be curious about it. I love my little story, so I'll try to be brief because I know I dominate a lot of these. I remember standing at the storefront with the CEO of Ralph Lauren, Roger Farah, and most people would flock away from him, right? Because they were intimidated. They didn't want him to ask them a question they didn't know. I was always a person that would be like right by his side because I was so curious as to like, what is he thinking? What is he going to ask? What is he looking at? So we were doing a whirlwind store tour, and I, of course, swooned right next to him. And I said, Roger, mind me asking, what are you looking at? Because he would enter a store and just stand there and kind of like look around. And everyone else was like, what does my presentation look like? And, the visual people were worrying about the signs being straight. And I was standing there, and he just said, I want to know what you want me to do as a customer. And it took me a while to digest that, but it stayed with me. I guess it goes back to that, be intentional. When you walk into a retail store, do you want them to go right or left? Do you want them to buy a polo shirt? Do you want them to buy 5 items in a wardrobe? Do you want them to buy a dress? Do you want them to engage with a promotion? What do you want them to do? And because I asked him so many questions, he really built, I was able to build a rapport with him who was much more senior than me even at the time. And that went a long way. And I look for that in new talent as well, where they're not intimidated, as long as they don't come across arrogant or, brown nose. If they truly are curious and they truly are looking to pull wisdom out of the thought leaders in the company, you can spot that. And that's a critical trait of something I look for.
Lucille pretty much took a lot of the words out of my mouth, but I will say, as a quick story for me, even though I wouldn't speak up many times when we had guest speakers or was maybe more introverted than I'd like to admit, I was relatively good at following up. And if there's something I wanted to pursue, I would pretty much pursue it relentlessly. And that's kind of how it led into my first opportunity for Fox Sports as an intern, was basically calling on a weekly and daily basis until the career services advisors were like, look, we'll call you, kind of thing. And I kept trying to find out about opportunities at that time in the sports industry. And after probably, a dozen or 2 dozen no's, and there's nothing out there at this point, one random Wednesday that I called, and all of a sudden, yes, actually a gentleman just before you called said they're looking for interns to cover Fox Sports, cover New York Jets for Fox Sports. So out of nothing arose an opportunity, just not because maybe I was the most qualified or the best candidate. It was because that I just stayed on top of it. I continued to pursue it, and I just wouldn't take no for an answer. So for me, the curiosity factor, showing that you're engaged, that you want to learn more, you're prepared for interviews, but also not being easily discouraged and turned away, that you want to be relentless, especially if it's industry you're passionate about, that basically you're not going to take no for an answer.
Awesome. Would anyone else like to add to that? No, we're good. All right. My next question is, how important are internships to a new graduate? We hear it all the time, internships, internships, internships. If you guys could just speak a little bit about your own experience with internships, like did any of them help you guys when you guys were starting out? How were you able to diversify yourself there? So let's start with Gino.
Yeah, internships give you that kind of like safe environment to learn and stretch your muscles in the spaces that you just learn the frameworks within your coursework. But I don't think it's a make or break. I think in the world where there's so many free and open data sets, open briefs within the marketplace, projects and point of views that you can be out there. Like if you are feeling that pressure or anxiety that you haven't done one yet, I think post-graduation, you still have the opportunity to do one. And there's also just kind of a portfolio that you can put together for yourself that showcases your skill sets, whether it be through an analysis of open data, whether it be a point of view on a new digital channel, or just a recommendation for a brand. I think you can build a nice portfolio. So I think they're extremely important in giving you a leg up on the competition, but I wouldn't be driven by anxiety if you didn't finish one by your undergrad.
So I feel like what helped me in doing an internship was really having that brand on my resume of who I worked for. And it, I think, was appealing to those when I was applying to my first job. So I think that was helpful. I was lucky enough to go on several intern interviews and had a choice between many. And there were some that paid very well. And I ended up taking one that I got a travel stipend that didn't even cover my train ticket to New York. So I was basically paying to do the internship, but it turned out to be just really the best one that had the most relevant marketing work involved and had a great brand. So I put that first. I also think that internships are a great way to get real exposure to how companies operate and what they expect from you. So, I think it just gives you a little bit of a leg up on knowing how to just really how to be in a corporate setting as you go into your first job. So, when I was in school, I feel like I did my check mark, like, hey, I did my one internship, but I now just see so many resumes with just many internships. And I still think the quality of the internship is more important than the quantity, though. But it does seem like it's gotten a little more competitive as to, doing internships throughout the years. But again, I would focus on the quality of the work in that internship and the brand, so that would be my advice there.
And never work for free.
Sorry. Yeah.
Never work for free. I think there was a big trend, and I don't know if it still happens, where employers would petition it as saying, we give you college credit, but it's not up to the employer to give you the college credit. It's up to your university to give you the college credit. So in a world where Google and Facebook offers their interns six-figure salaries for the summer, don't ever work for free unless it's a volunteer and a passion project that's extremely important to you, a nonprofit. Never work for free.
Well, I'll jump in because I probably was on the opposite end of the spectrum of Sarah, that I was maybe too particular, that I wanted to find that perfect internship opportunity. And I thought, well, I'm going to do exactly what I did from undergraduate to graduate. I'm going to roll right in from an internship, work at that company for 30 years, retire happily at a younger age and be able to enjoy my golden years. Well, that's not the way of the world as we know it. I mean, even some of the panelists, myself included, have been in a number of different positions at different companies since the panel first started 4 or 5 years ago. And that's kind of just the way of the world. So I think the way that I looked at it at the time, frankly, one of my mentors was my father, who, again, followed that classic career track, working at one company, 35 years and retiring. I kind of envisioned that would be how my career path would go. And it so far hasn't been further from the truth. So my advice would be you can hone in and focus on what opportunities are out there and whether they're paid or unpaid. Again, I tend to do some of the unpaid because it is for experience, not on a long-term basis. but don't, because it's in a different industry or maybe a different title than you desire to be your final career path, don't let that deter you from at least like dipping your toe in the water and trying it for a summer or for a short period of time.
All right, well, thank you guys for sharing. And if for anyone on this call who hasn't had an internship yet, we have an amazing, career staff here at FDU. They're always helping you and sending you opportunities out on Handshake. So definitely sign up for that. Get in contact with Pat. She helps a lot of people here. All right, my next question, we're in the final stretch now, so don't worry. 2 more questions. My next question is, I myself am enrolled in the 4+1 program here. And, given the climate of the world, a lot of students, even recent graduates, are considering going back to school for higher education. My question is for Sarah, Rick, and Lucille. How important is an MBA and how did it help you in your career? I know sometimes, if you're like me, it's hard to kind of see the future effects of that MBA. So if you guys could just speak to that.
I'll go back to back, I guess. So for me, again, an MBA was critically important. This may have changed since I graduated, but for those students, and I'd imagine the majority of you that are attending this panel are serious students or take your studies seriously. I had a number of courses that were waived, being obviously an FDU alum and rolling into a master's, that made it advantageous for me to just continue on with my education. And I could work, at that time I was working for Verizon Wireless, so I was able to work full time and then also do MBA coursework. And basically, because of the fact I had a lot of courses waived, what turned into what could have been a 1.5-year program really ended up being 2 semesters. So there is that incentive that for a lot of students may be available, and I jumped at the opportunity. I'm glad I did. But as far as how I've used it, I think I did allude to before how I've used it throughout my career. But again, it's something that it's no guarantee of career success. Even when I was graduating, and it seemed like a long time ago, it really wasn't. An undergraduate degree was no guarantee of a first job or a career. And now it's almost becoming the fact that even advanced degrees, master's degrees, are no guarantee of success in a respective field. So I don't want to mislead anybody and think that the MBA is going to be the end all be all and guarantee that you're going to make X salary or be a certain level of success, but it puts you in the game, so to speak, and you have that foundational knowledge. Some of the panelists said that you'll have the leg up on some of the other candidates that may or may not have those degrees.
Yeah, I would say that it, more than anything, it just helps you personally in your career in terms of the caliber of business acumen and expanding your knowledge. So I was intentional about, I knew I wanted to go into marketing. I love marketing, but I was intentional about doing international business, something different for my MBA, since I had already done a marketing degree undergrad, and think about like, what are those other areas of business that are going to put me in the leadership roles? So, I think that it's really just about how it improves what you can contribute to an organization. And there's maybe some companies that have some guidance around if you get a higher education degree that maybe you get some, I don't really know any specifically, that maybe you get some additional benefit or get put on some path, but I know I didn't work for one of those companies. It was really just to improve myself. Of course, they usually know about it and they acknowledge and they're excited that you're investing in yourself. In fact, my company at the time paid for most of my MBA, so they cared about investing in me. But it doesn't necessarily say, okay, tomorrow you're going to get a promotion or a raise because of it. But it certainly, helps you for the long term.
I think it's becoming a point of entry. I've been in, various stages of my career in transition. And again, I go back to, had I not have the resume that I built, I would be significantly disadvantaged. The MBA requirement I see consistently on jobs within the marketing universe. And I think one of the key reasons why is because so much of marketing now is data and analytics. And many of these recruiters and companies want to make sure that the marketers they're bringing in have an ability to understand how the business needs to work and how to make money and how to understand the reporting and how to really interface within the organization given today's business climate. So I would highly encourage it. I don't think you'll need it for your very first job, I don't think it's a requirement for first job. If you have the opportunity to have a company that would pay for it, that would be the best path. If not, I would recommend that you at least get a little experience, but I would absolutely try to get that level of education on your resume.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much to speaking to the value of the MBA. All right, last question for everyone. What do you guys want to do next? Is it somewhere where you guys want to move? Do you guys have your eyes on a certain job? I know for you, Sarah, you just moved with your job, and so did Gino. So like, what's next for you guys in your career path?
If I had to say what's most important to me, I would say voting. And I think everybody on this call should look forward to the next few days of early voting, in-person voting. Put forth your civil duty and right to go out there and vote. And you know, I think I'm waiting for a lot of those decisions to make the next move in my life. And so by getting behind that momentum, that's what I want to do next.
I'm actually in a point of what's next. So I've always been a writer. As I said, I always gear a little bit to the creative side. So I'm a contributing writer to sharpfields.com. So what's next? I think I'd like to have a little bit more of a portfolio career. I was saying at the beginning of the call, I think I was mentioning it to Mary and possibly Rick, that I'm currently launching a website to try to bring a couple of product ideas and innovations that I had to market. Mostly as side income and as a hobby, but I think it could be quite scalable. And I am looking for what I'm calling my last great position, predominantly in new retail. I have been kicked in the butt with brick and mortar for way too long, even though I'm a huge fan of it. But I am looking for more of the internet retail subscription model, and preferably in the organics or sustainability space.
I'm in a similar point in my career, you know, coming out as a 22-year-old, let's call it undergraduate, going to my master's, and then of course landing that internship with Fox Sports. It was eye-opening being able to interview all these Jets and Giants players and interact with coaches and be at practices all the time. But you know, having done that now for 10 plus years, whether I believe it or not, I think the next stage for my career happens to be not news writing every day and covering the team and traveling to the events. It's again more chronicling my experience. I have a self-published book I have on Amazon that's Sports Writers Beware, and it kind of unveils the ugly underbelly of the beast in sports writing, some of the stuff that the sports columnists and sports writers won't tell you from my experiences in the press box. It was just kind of a project of mine that kind of I worked on slowly over the years, and then eventually self-published it and sent it out to a couple of publishers, and through that actually led to this next opportunity, what I'm doing with History Press, writing about the Brooklyn Nets and their history as a franchise. So for me, like I said, I think one of the panelists had mentioned just always have a hype folder of the things you did. Even going back to my undergraduate days, I always had a sports writing blog. I had all my news clippings from the staff, the Metro at the time. I wrote news articles from the Metro and covered sports. So just keep all that together and use that if for nothing else but to validate everything you've done, to see where you've been and where you're going to go. Because again, I never would have thought in my wildest dreams after, covering collegiate sports, Division III in the case of Florham Park, and then being there interviewing Eli Manning and interviewing him as he's teary-eyed because Tom Coughlin's being fired. It's a skill set that I developed over many years, and it can bring you to very cool places. And that's probably true of any industry. So for me, I would just say, continue building your resume, continue building your brand, and just don't forget where you came from, because all those steps you took along the way, if you want to continue on with your career, you're going to have to keep building and building.
Yep. For me, so I've been in my role about 18 months, so not looking to go somewhere else right now, but and really enjoying living in Florida. But long term, I've kind of been on this path where I want to be a CMO, and that's kind of my goal. And right now I actually report to our COO. So I actually took a first job that lives outside of the marketing department, focusing on product. So I think just, trying to get experience in different parts of the business so that you can be, a great CMO. And I know, Lucille, you've already done that. So that's really where I want to head. when I was in my last company at Trump Hotels, I did lead marketing at a VP level. So I kind of really had that kind of mini CMO in a smaller company type role without having that title. It's really being responsible for all the functions of marketing, whether it be PR or digital or all these different areas. But, you know, I want to do that for big brands. I went back to working for a big company. I learned a lot working in a small environment. But I think more than anything in your career as a marketer, at least for me, I want to work for, you know, great brands and products that I believe in. I don't know if I were to ever switch industries, maybe I'd go work for brands that are part of like my passions, which I love golfing. So that'd be a cool industry to work in. I love wine. I love, you know, the great thing about marketing is you can go into different areas. So that would be really cool. Maybe I could live in Napa or something one day. But I think one other thing to add to that is I think another thing that would be really cool is whenever I think like my career is to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm done with the corporate stuff down the road, I think it'd be really cool to go be a college professor afterwards and to share all those real life experiences. So I love going to FDU and speaking to classes and all of that. So it'd be something that would be potentially cool down the road, but I'm not ready to do that yet.
Awesome. That's definitely interesting. I'm sure there'll be a lot of students wanting to take your classes if that ever happens. But overall, I'm very excited for what the future holds for all of you. And I'm, you know, completely sure that you guys are going to keep continuing making FDU proud. So thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm just going to pass it over to Mary.
Thank you, Asha. You were fabulous. And our panel was also amazing. You guys stayed on until almost 5:30. Thank you so much. And we have almost all our students. The only reason why a couple may have left is because they have class, but this was fabulous. Do you have time for a couple of questions if the students have them?
I'm good. I'm happy to.
Okay, students, ask away. Now's your time.
Hi, my name's Jordan Winter. I actually had a question for Rick.
Sure.
So I'm actually a graphic design major with a digital marketing minor, but I really want to go into the sports industry to do sports design. So I was wondering like what the best ways are to look for jobs and network to get into the sports industry.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of organizations, including the Jets, of course, who are right across from the Forum campus, have seasonal volunteer opportunities. And then you said graphic design, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, they even also have communications. So my best advice to you would, of course, be to check the team website, but also go to teamworkonline.com. I believe it is a subscription-based service, so it's going to provide you with all the latest jobs that are available in the sports industry. Now, again, without any personal referrals, you're basically sending out a resume into cyberspace that either is going to be put in a digital pile or a physical pile. So you have to, of course, separate yourself. Have you done any current internships currently, or no, you have not?
Yes. Two. One was for sports industry, and then it was for a sports agency in Edgewater, New Jersey.
Okay.
And then another one was more like marketing wise.
Okay, so as far as the sports agency, my advice to you, and again, if you've worked for clients that were sports brands, that perhaps if you have any contacts that are there that you could follow up with and talk about your time working at the agency, or maybe perhaps some of the graphic design work you did for that brand, to maybe even reach out, tell them exactly what you're telling me, see if there are any opportunities within that brand or, you know, other associated brands that they own or operate. That could be a good starting place because, again, what you had your foot in the door, of course, is that internship. So to use and leverage the contacts you made, even if it was just a short time, that would be a suggestion because, again, you could be the greatest graphic designer in the world, but once you're in that, you know, online competitive community where you're just another name and another resume, it'll be difficult to distinguish yourself without the face-to-face contact, you know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Now's your opportunity. Don't be shy.
I have a question also.
Go ahead, Justine.
So right now I'm a senior. I graduate this upcoming May, and my question, like Jordan, is I'm also majoring in digital marketing and I minor in graphic design. But when I was younger, I was really interested in fashion design. I learned how to sew and everything. and that changed once I got older. So my question really is, with somebody like me that has a whole lot of interest, how do I zero in on what exactly the job I'm looking for is, or what exactly would be right for me?
I could take that. I would suggest that you try to get into an agency. It's really good to see all the different accounts. Even if you get assigned to a specific division or account group, you really will be able to cross-pollinate and pick the agency or an agency that has a diversity of different kinds of industries that might have some fashion, that might have some food or packaged goods. And I think you'll get a really broad stroke of where your interests lie from trying to at least use that as a stepping point.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question.
Go ahead, Josh.
So I apply for a lot of internships. I try to apply to a few a week. My question is for Rick. You said that you kept calling that one agency. How do you deal with them not responding? And like, how would you go about it? Like emailing again or reaching out again without seeming like, do they ever think that you're like annoying? Like, I don't know if that's the right word, but like, do they ever think that like, oh, okay, this person just keeps bothering us? Or like, how do I go about, because if I'm like really interested in a company, how do I go about that?
So what efforts, so you're saying, my personal experience was with the Fairleigh Dickinson Career Services that was working on my behalf to find opportunities that were viable or that perhaps fit what I was looking for. So because again, you know, the school, just like as a professor, I'm working to mentor the students. My position was Career Services working to help me, to place me in a field or a career where I'm going to reflect well in the school and I'm going to obviously do okay for myself. So I was kind of relentless in that regard. But as far as how often you're saying you're reaching out on a weekly basis and getting absolutely no response, or they're just not hiring this time, like what kind of responses are you receiving?
I try to submit my resume, like whenever Mary or Pat like reach out and send us internships, I try to like scroll through and see which ones I like relate to. But 9 out of the 10 times, like they don't get back to me. So I was just wondering, like, how would you go about, like, say I really like one, how would I reach out again without seeming like too over eager?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to toe that line between obviously, of course, being conscientious and following up, and you don't want to come across as desperate. So I would say if you're following up with perhaps, 3 or 4 email follow-ups, if you've left maybe a voicemail message or two, you kind of have to let things calm down and maybe just put it on a calendar every 2 months to follow up. Hi, I reached out back in October. Now, we're turning the calendar year to 2021. I just want to see if anything has opened up in your department or of any openings currently at the organization. I personally don't see any harm in doing that. Likely if they're not getting back to you, and you're following up weekly or even, dare I say, every couple of days, you may want to just give it some time because there just may not be an opportunity there, but you'd still want to stay in the background of their mind, at least to let them know that if there is something open, even if this is somebody that's been calling me on a regular basis, they're at least, still reminding me, but not necessarily every day.
I would have an alternative recommendation in addition to sort of the perseverance that Rick is outlining. Finding an internship is like applying for a job. The odds of you getting that internship without some kind of connection or engagement with people inside the company is going to be exceptionally limited. You're going to wind up in this automatic, tracking system or in a pile of other people. And in my experience, in every single company, people who got the internships were personal friends of the executives. I know that sounds harsh. My recommendation would be identify the companies, even if they don't have an internship that goes through Mary or FDU, identify the companies that really interest you and find people in those companies. People are really supportive in helping as long as you're not asking them for something out of the gate. So if you, and LinkedIn is very important, don't wait for senior year, don't wait for internships to first make network connections. You really almost have to start this when you're a second semester freshman, and some of you better late than never. Others, this is a lifelong pursuit of networking and managing your career path. Find companies that you want to be part of. Link in those people, send them messages, just say, hey, I'm a student, I'm not even ready for the workforce. Can I pick your brain? Can I understand what you do at this organization? They will more than likely respond to you somehow. You will have much better odds with somebody saying, sure, I'll give you, and only ask for 20 minutes. That seems to be the magic number that I've had success with, not a half hour or an hour. And be very specific, very intentional with what you want to ask them. Have questions pre-prepared. What do you do in the organization? What do you like about your job? How did you get your job? What are some of the key skills you look for outside of the educational requirements? Build a rapport with people. Then, as opportunities start to come up, you could say, hey, so-and-so, if you recall, I really appreciate you spending time with me a couple of months ago, or yada, yada. And, you know, I heard you're doing an internship. I applied for that internship. Would you mind passing my resume on as well? Again, the effort for that person to hit forward on the internal email is almost zero. And coming from the inbox of somebody in a company, even if they're not your, you know, niece and or best friend's child, you will get in on that desk. So I would say proactively start to manage your network now, and then use that network to strategically secure the internships that you want. I still do this to this day. I have been stalking Scott Tannen at Boll and Branch because I love everything they do. He finally reached out to me personally, but I like what he posts on Facebook and LinkedIn. I add comments to his social. He sees my name all the time. This man thinks we know each other. I assure you I don't know him. We may have met, but he thinks we now have a rapport where he could reach out to me and vice versa. Do that proactively starting tomorrow for all of you. Just make it part of your daily routine. Every day, spend 20 minutes on LinkedIn. Reach out to people and companies that you admire. Literally say in my messaging, when I still reach out to people, I say, I'm expanding my first degree connections with talent in companies that I really respect and admire. I'd love to make you a first degree connection. They'll be like, yeah, sure. What the hell? I'll, you know, add you. And then follow up with them. Hey, thanks for accepting that. Would love if I can pick your brain for 20 minutes. I see that you're in X, Y, and Z position. I assure you that is a much better path than just the blanket submissions and follow-ups and phone calls. You will get some traction that way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I ended up hiring someone that happened to reach out to me, someone I didn't know, reached out to me on LinkedIn when I was working in my last job. And it just so happened we were about to post a role that was completely relevant. It was just great timing, and we hired the person.
Mm-hmm. So. And just to, yeah, again, I think that's a good point, Lucille, that you want to use and leverage your personal network, your professional network, of course, the FDU school community, and just plant seeds wherever you can. Like if you've developed a reputation as somebody that's eager, not overly eager, but eager in a certain field, and you're conscientious and you follow up, that is in a way almost subconsciously branding yourself as that, and people remember that and they understand that you are keeping your eyes and ears open for opportunities. So when they do present themselves, and even if you've established some kind of relationship, even if it's on a very surfacey level, that'll increase your chances of visibility and perhaps getting your resume into the right hands.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Any more questions? These are great. And thank you so much to all the FDU alum for staying and being so wonderful and welcoming to our students.
Hi, Alexander Coulter. I had a question. So you guys talked earlier about how like the MBA is a good way to show that you have those analytical and, you know, broader business perspectives going on inside your head and in the marketing field. Do you think that maybe like for this early stage where maybe we're not planning to go out and get the MBA, we're planning to work up it and then get our MBA, do you think maybe a good way to show that is like practical skills by like getting certifications for different, you know, practical things like SEO and SEM optimization? I know I had Rick's social media class a few semesters ago, and we did a Hootsuite management. So yeah.
I would say absolutely. I think it shows that you're a person that wants to learn, that wants to continue to grow. I did go back right away to do my MBA, but I started working and was doing it over several semesters while I was working. And there were a bunch of people that did it right out of the gate as well, but they weren't working. They were doing it full time. And I do feel like the caliber for those of us that were working, even if it wasn't for a long time, just of the ability to relate what you do in a corporation to the content in the class is just higher caliber. So whether you wait a long time or you're just doing it, while you're working, I think it is helpful to get the most out of it. Not to say if someone didn't get an MBA right away, and they were doing it full time, I would think that was bad. But I do think I just think I personally got more out of it, being able to relate it to the real world. But I definitely think, the certifications, those are great foundational, especially at that stage of the game. So absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think you'll need it for your first job. I really don't. I think it's going to be most important as you start to progress, and then you realize, wow, it's going to be really hard to go back and get it. So don't wait too long, meaning, 5 years or so. Once you're at that manager level, it's going to become more critical. I would say now, definitely take the business classes, even if they have to be electives. I know we all like our art history and theater classes, as did I, but definitely use them as electives and take accounting, take finance, really try to have understanding. And you can put those classes on your resume so they know, even if you're in a creative field or going down a path where you would think that's not relatable, you can say, I took this class, or I was in this finance club, or I did X, Y, and Z. The other thing that I had done just to get MBA on my resume, Rutgers offers a week-long, and it's called a mini MBA. Most people think I have an MBA because I have mini MBA on it, even though I articulate that it's a week-long intensive certification class. So that's a path as well related to your question around certifications or continued education. So I would say immediately take some critical business, just introductory business courses for fundamental understanding. And I would look into a couple of certifications, and then I think you can wait a little bit on the MBA for finance and also grounded in your business experience.
And this certification approach allows you to almost guide yourself through what you want to focus on. Digital marketing is a very broad area these days. It's not just social media and websites anymore. So regardless of which certification you go down, it helps you understand what are the nuts and bolts and in the weeds type activities that would pertain to that type of job, whether it be SEO, paid search advertising, Facebook advertising, and you start to understand, is this something I like? Is this something I don't like? At a very low risk type position, so that you can help steer where you want to go within your career. And as an outcome, it makes you look more qualified for the roles that you are applying for.
And I agree with what everyone said. And Alex, I'm happy that you did enjoy the Hootsuite certification. As you probably saw from G Suite, and there's a number of different services that offer these online courses. You, just like Gino said, you can almost choose your adventure, so to speak, and gain that technical know-how and knowledge in your given field. So it's a good starting point. It's a good jumping off point. And I agree with Lucille's sentiments that you may not necessarily need the MBA for the early part in your career, but at the same token, with what Sarah was saying, it kind of, the MBA crystallizes everything you learned at the undergraduate level. And when you're working either full-time at the same time or shortly after, you bring a lot of that, the knowledge base that you've put together and put it into practical use. So that was just my experience, but everybody's situation is different. But a good starting point are the certification courses.
Yeah, and LinkedIn Learning offers them for free. So I took a Google Analytics class. You get a virtual certificate. Again, it gives you content to put on your own website or your own LinkedIn page for branding. But it gives you a really good broad overview, so that you understand, A, is their interest, and B, you have something to say that, yeah, I did some of that. I have a LinkedIn Learning certification in Google Analytics or search or Amazon Marketplace or whatnot. So I would definitely explore that because they're free. It's just a matter of you doing them.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is so fabulous. I think we have time for one more question, and then we have to let our panelists go. But this is incredible. One of the best PDP sessions of the entire semester. Anybody else? One more?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hello. How has COVID affected your jobs in your industries, especially regarding hospitality, which I know is hurting a lot right now due to COVID?
Yeah, I find myself to be very lucky to still be doing what I love. Our industry, it's not unique to our company, but across the industry, lots of reductions in staff and furloughs and all of that. We shut down. We actually just made the decision to close every single one of our vacation club resorts. Separate from hotels, that was sort of different. They took a different approach, but shut down every single one during the beginning of COVID, and didn't start reopening them until June. And we're still about 85% of them are open. We're still working on opening others. So we sell about 2 billion in timeshare sales a year. So when you shut everything and you can't sell timeshare, you literally turn off your business. But it was the right thing to do. And now we've reopened with safe procedures and all of that, and social distancing. And it is ramping back up. It won't be to the levels of prior, really until this is gone. But I think that our company is lucky in that we focus on leisure travel, since we're vacation clubs and vacation rentals. So there's a demand, I think, for leisure travel, but business travel has literally turned off. So I would imagine at Hilton, it's probably a little bit different. But I think one of our benefits, and we had our earnings call this morning and we continue to talk about, is one, we're in the leisure travel space. We've got a lot of drive to destinations. So we're definitely seeing people driving to, we have people who own their vacations with us. So they're a little bit more motivated to use it. So it's definitely ramping up, but it's not easy. And, obviously impacts the industry.
Yeah, and to build on that specifically for Hilton, we've made very much similar right sizing of the business. A lot of the companies, the hotel companies, are almost a branding business model. So we are franchise based. We don't own most of our properties. So from a corporate perspective, it allows us to be very nimble and agile, but we still have to support our brands and our properties and everybody else who's going through the same hardships. So as much as we've tightened the belt, there has been some dip. There is this pent up travel demand that is starting to showcase itself across a lot of markets. Some markets are even back to their typical levels, like in Asia Pacific and China. But the thing that keeps me kind of optimistic about travel as an industry is a lot of the civil unrest, or the unrest as a country that we have right now. And I think a lot of how we settle disputes and understanding, think about different walks of life, different experiences, different cultures, is through travel and experience. And so the more that people have that ability to travel and think about new countries, cultures, and people, and meeting them, I think it makes the world a much better place to live in when you can understand and walk a mile in that person's shoes. So I have a ton of optimism for the industry as a whole. And I think any pullbacks that we're having right now are just going to shoot themselves through the ceiling over the next year or two.
Yeah, we keep using this term like pent up demand. People are just itching to travel. So it'll be interesting, especially in our world where people own with us and, there's only a certain amount of inventory. When people really start to all travel at the same time, there's going to be a lot of demand, and people are going to be ready to do that. Some are, but not everyone yet. So.
I'm going to, not in hospitality, but since I was so victimized by COVID, I'm in retail, as I said early on. So pretty much everyone I know was furloughed or laid off, or the business is closing. So we were very much impacted. I would say that the silver lining, and particularly being young in your career, look for these moments of crisis change. 2008 had it. This year, 2021 is going to have it, because industries have to evolve. And when industries start to evolve, you have new innovations. BOPAC, which is buy online, pick up at curb, is a whole new dimension to retail that didn't exist as of March. So retail outside of retail, that's going to open up a whole new operational and logistical field. Maybe not so much as marketers, but you need to be aware that the consumer behavior is changing. There will be opportunity in that. I mentioned Boll and Branch, and one of the reasons I like them is because they're one of the first retailers to use an innovative environmental lighting system that will sanitize stores. So you don't have to worry about wiping down doorknobs and people not being able to touch, showrooming objects. There will be careers in that kind of technology. The emergence of internet and virtual experiences is going to be a whole nother dimension, not just augmented reality, but figuring out how to replicate a physical space so that you're able to engage with brands in a different way than retail has been doing in the past, will open up a whole new floodgate of career opportunities. So be students of the marketplace, be students of how customers are responding to this, because where the customer goes is ultimately where the jobs will land. And I had said this many years ago with Facebook. I actually bought stock early on. So when everyone's like, oh, it's a social platform, people just saying they like girls or, at Harvard and whatnot. And I said, yeah, but look at the acquisition rate. They had 1 billion users at one point, and now, it was growing incrementally thereafter. I said, where customers are, advertisers will follow. Where the money is, jobs will follow. So be mindful during these times where you might be a little, hesitant entering the world, or, a little concerned about what the future holds, and just recognize you're in the best possible position to take advantage of all of these new evolutions right at the starting gate. So again, just be mindful, be students of the marketplace, be students of the customers, and recognize that while businesses may be failing, innovation is going to present new successes.
And very quickly, in my line of work, again, having covered events on a daily basis, sporting events, and now transitioning to book writing, the crisis, of course, the pandemic, did have a positive, and I don't want to sound grim, but a positive impact on me as far as being able to interview a lot of athletes that maybe would have been, in the middle of their seasons, or front office executives worrying about making trades. And they are home now, basically confined to their homes. This is going back to the lockdown, and wanting to socialize and be with people. So they wanted, if anything, wouldn't turn down an opportunity to speak with me for an interview for a book about their time with a certain organization. So there was some positive impact in that regard. What I worry about, and what I think will be the new normal in sports writing reporting, covering sports day in and day out, is, you're not going to have reporters face to face with athletes anymore as far as daily beat reporters. Television reporting is one thing, but having an opportunity over the last 10 years to interview Eli Manning, interview all the Giants and Jets players, now that's done just how we're doing it, via Zoom. The face-to-face interaction is in there, the interpersonal skills and all the different nonverbal cues you can pick up on by being next to somebody. It's just not there. So I think it's going to be the new normal until this pandemic's behind us. And I wonder the level of the reporting and the journalism field as a whole, what the byproduct of that is going to be, and whether advances in technology, or if we're going to go back to the original face-to-face, entering the locker room, talking with players in the immediate aftermath of a big win or a big loss. That's something that you can't replicate or recreate, even if you try to do so via technology like Zoom and other conference services.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your input.
Amazing. You guys are so incredible. Seriously, you stayed with us for almost 2 hours. And the only reason why the students left was because they have class. But anyway, I just want to thank you again. Can the students feel free to reach out either via LinkedIn or email? Is that all okay?
Absolutely. I put a link on here for my LinkedIn. So I can send that again if it and my email.
Awesome. That's terrific. I can share it with them. This was so great. And Asha, you were amazing, fabulous, awesome. So I'm telling you, best PDP ever. Jeremy's going to share the QR code. We have the professional development points. So students, if you want to put this in your professional development portfolio, please copy the code. And our panelists, thank you again. We will definitely be in touch. Lucille, you're part of the band now.
Great job.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
So much.